Oh,
Was that loud?
Away? Oh, no.
Begin as we always do, with the pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Hopefully we've survived the last of our weather disruptions and we can get busy with the matter of spring, but I'm sure Mother Nature has other plans for us. We begin as we always do with our administrative remarks, and Ms. Pelican, if you wouldn't mind
Good evening.
kicking that off.
I would like to reserve my comments this evening for executive session.
Okay, there's something to look forward to then. And Mr. Carlson, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'll also reserve my comments.
Okay, we're all saving ourselves for later. And Ms. Gosh, how are those policies doing?
We're so much more than policy.
Oh, come on.
If you don't mind, I would like to take a moment to highlight a couple of exciting curricular endeavors that we're engaged in. First is our science curriculum. So despite all the weather, we have been paying particular attention to our science curriculum K-12. We're actually taking advantage of one of the days that we are in session next week to meet K-6 to review our K-5 science curriculum using Project Lead the Way as an anchor and supplementing with Science 21 and the Jason project. So of course we're doing this aligning to the next generation science standards as well as our strategic coherence plan, making a Brewster curriculum that best meets the needs of our students. We've also begun conversations at the middle school level to figure out alongside with teachers how to make a hands-on science experience more accessible for all of our students there. And of course, we'll be looking at our science offerings at the high school as well. As you know, next year we plan on offering a Project Lead the Way Biomedical Innovation. So that's just one example of the ways that we are trying to spruce up our science offerings across the district. And second, our IB, or International Baccalaureate Feasibility Study Task Force, has met 3 times this month, including a full-day visit to Clarkstown South High School. The team, which is comprised of parents, teachers, administrators, have explored more about the IB diploma program and how it can enhance, not replace, our curricular offerings that we currently have. We spent some time examining our profile of a graduate and alongside the IB learner profile. And we've really developed a list of questions and wonderings that we are bringing to Somers High School in April. And just know that we're doing all this again through the lens of strengthening our current curricular program, and it's an opportunity for all students, not just for the elite students. So we look forward to updating the board with a more complete synopsis of our task force and our agendas in May. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Sounds like a lot of good work. Thank you. And I guess, sure.
Hello, Dr. Janborn, Board Trustees. Just a few items to share with you. First and foremost, congratulations to the high school for their production of Music Man, which was really an outstanding performance. It also cast a wide net because there were young children from our lower grades who were present, and they're very talented, and we look forward to their continuing interest in our performing arts program. As you know, vacation is now, spring break is now March 30th, April 2nd, and April 3rd, and that's due to the fact that we extended our 5-day limit, which we have developed in our budget, in our calendar for 17-18. We will be in session on April 4th, 5th, and 6th, so it's an unfortunate reality, but sometimes the weather is not in our favor, and this was certainly one of the winters. And fortunately for us, we held on to some days. Some of our surrounding districts in Somers lost all their days due to electrical outages, so we're fortunate in that regard. We'll also be able to provide an update for the board on our child nutrition program. We'll do that at the May 22nd board meeting, and it's really to follow up and learn about the progression of the Chef Ann project recommendations, which were pretty extensive. On April 11th, we start our New York State grades 3 through 8 ELA assessment. As you know, No Child Left Behind became the ESSA program, the Every Student Succeeds Act. The component this time around in the federal legislation addresses the participation level. As you know, unlike similar to other districts, we had a number of parents who opted out of these state assessments. So ESSA has a provision about the participation level, which really forces districts to pay attention to them. It is the goal of ESSA to ensure that the 95% participation requirement is met by districts, and the ways in which they're expecting districts to maintain that participation level is to monitor the degree to which that number is maintained, and when it isn't, when it falls below that level, and we certainly fell below that level. There are a certain number of steps or progressive steps. The first step requires a self-assessment if we do fall below that level for this particular April administration. If after the self-assessment and we develop a participation plan that we don't find that the number increases, we are expected to engage in an audit. And that audit then, again, is expected to increase that participation rate, and if that audit isn't successful, we have to contract with Putnam, Northern Westchester, BOCES to look at ways to develop a plan, an improvement plan to increase the participation level. And if that doesn't work, we're required to undertake activities, I don't know what that means, to raise student participation for the state assessments. So I share all that to let you know that that is a focus. So, you know, when we send our letters out to our parents about the 3 through 8 assessments in math and English, we will be including this information along with other things that the state indicates that they have done to entice students to take the test, such as reducing the number of test questions, making it untimed, and reducing it to 2 days. So that's the information with regard to that. Hopefully many of you will come out to the Spaghetti Bistro tomorrow night at H.H. Wells. It starts at 5:30. There are lots of fun things going on, lots of great food, and good people. And the proceeds, of course, go to a really great cause. After the bistro, we hope that you head over to Brewster High School for the prevention assessment survey presentation, which is the survey that's administered every 2 years to students in grades 8 through 12 to monitor various risky behaviors that some students are engaged in. And the presenters will be Kristen McConnell and Doreen Lockwood of the Putnam Coalition of Communities of Care Group. Followed by that, which will be in the ILC, a hidden mischief simulation will be set up, and it's essentially a team bedroom, and all the ways there's over 60 places where students might have placed items that might be drug paraphernalia or drugs. So that's been very popular. The coalition purchased one, and it's been used extensively around the region. So I hope that parents are able to participate in that. It's some very useful information and timely information. And that will start at 7 o'clock. On April 19th, please come out to the Dangers of Vaping presentation, which will be conducted by Dr. Stephen Dewey. This is compliments of the PTA, PTSAs who are sponsoring him. As you know, vaping is a popular pastime of some of our teens, and it is not benign. It is not an innocent act, and come and listen to Dr. Dewey explain what it does to the brain and to the lungs. Please join us on April 13th at 6 o'clock at Brewster High School in the cafeteria for the World Cup of Cultures, which is sponsored by Brewster Community Group, which includes parents and students and community members who are just finding ways to bring the community together, to learn together, and to enjoy each other's company. That will be followed by a performance in the PAC, and we hope that you're there for that. I received a flyer from Austin High School. It's a poverty simulation experience, which some of you participated in, have been local. That's on May 3rd from 4 to 7. And basically, it takes families through what it's like for a family of 4 to live on an annual salary of $25,000 a year, which is the threshold for poverty and federal threshold. So that information is available May 3rd, 4 to 7 p.m. Ossining High School, and we'll make sure that we provide, if you need some more information about that, we'll make sure that we provide that. On April 9th, our Code of Conduct Committee will be meeting to review our Code of Conduct so that we look at other ways besides using suspensions as a first default. It shouldn't be. At the state and federal level, a lot of that data is being reviewed and scrutinized very carefully because the idea is, that discipline should be progressive, and we should think long and hard about measures that we use, especially around drug use, where children are out of school for an extensive period of time, but that may not be in the best interest of children. And so we're going to have a child advocate, Karen Blumenthal, working with the Code of Conduct Committee, which will include administrators, parents, students, and obviously educators. So that'll be continuing work, and we'll be bringing forward a plan, a revised Code of Conduct to the Board of Education eventually to consider. And that's
Wow,
concludes that.
sounds like a lot of stuff.
A lot of things.
So I will only use a couple of moments here to try to set the tone. But tonight, as you know, we're going to begin our budget presentation discussion, which goes on at this time of the year, every year, for a couple of weeks. But tonight I decided to do something a little bit different, because as you know, sorry? Oh, students, of course. As you know, I'm losing my memory. Which is going to roll into the next thing I was going to say. I'm going to go backwards to the thing I should have been saying, and that is, welcome to Elizabeth and Julie, our student representatives. I apologize for being seen on. Thank you.
The recent walkout and post-walkout convention held a few weeks ago were successful. At the convention, students discussed gun violence in America, brainstormed different ways to make a difference, and wrote letters to representatives. As Dr. Henning mentioned, the Music Man was a great success this past weekend. Cast and crew members remarked on how well their opening night went. A few weeks ago, we met with Mrs. Cherry and set a date for the day of service. We plan to send high schoolers to see We Star on May 22nd, right around the end of AP week. Right now, we're developing activities to do with the kids, probably focusing on some STEM or collaborative activities, creative writing games, and a school-wide music video, perhaps. The 40 or so flags demo ordered a few weeks ago are now in. Moving forward, we just have to decide where to hang them and whether or not to rotate them in, since we have so many. We'd like to thank Ms. Horler and the high school administration once again for their support with this.
Demo is beginning to plan elections for those interested in getting involved in student government who are currently in grades 8 through 12. We specifically want to make sure we provide current 8th graders with some solid footing in student government before they get to the high school in September. The senior class has a Mario Kart tournament in the works. Students will be able to pay to play, and the money raised will go towards senior prom. Students going on the Iceland trip will be leaving this Sunday. And to save time, morning announcements are no longer being done over the loudspeaker, with the exception of the pledge. Announcements are now being emailed to all students in both English and Spanish. And finally, spring sports have recently begun.
Thank you both. Okay. Where was I before I interrupted myself? Oh, yeah. So I'm in a kind of a unique situation. Many of you should know by now. I'm leaving the Board of Education as of June 30th. And in so doing, I've had a lot of chances lately to kind of review the years. And I want to reflect and share some of this information with you before I go, because I'm very proud of you. I mean it sincerely. And I'm going to show you why in a few moments. Since I came on this board way back when, in the last century in fact, we together, the only way this could have possibly gotten done, we together as a community chose on various occasions to devote $100 million to the building, refurbishing, and creation of structures here, physical plant, together. Now, if I thought back then, in December of whatever year it was, that that's what we were going to be doing, December 1999, I don't think I would have run, because I would have said to myself, are you crazy? It's impossible to get this community to invest that much in these schools. We don't have it. And I could have come up with all the reasons why, in my head, that couldn't have happened. And you could have come up with the same reasons if somebody told you, here's what we're going to do in the next 15, 18 years. We're going to spend $100 million on your kids. So by happenstance and luck and whatever, we didn't go after it all just like that. We did it in bites. And the first big bite, back then, we considered that the big bond. And it was for $24 million, and we, the people, passed that on December 5th, 1999. And the board in the room breathed a sigh of relief because they never thought it could get done. The biggest bond before that was $9 million, which we passed to build CV Star. So you can imagine going from 9 to 24 mil. And I'm not going to run down the whole list. You could know it as well as I know it. My point to you tonight, though, is please never, never, ever underestimate yourselves. Never look at it as the tip of the iceberg. Look at yourselves as a community, and I mean this with kind regard. You are a community, and I brag about you wherever I go in this state, that chose to exceed themselves, that chose to exceed every projection on paper that anybody else could have made of you. But they would have been missing something. And only you have this something, and that is you folks know the Brewster heart, you folks know the Brewster passion, and what I've liked to call over these years, the Brewster pride. You built it darn good, but it wasn't just $100 million of infrastructure. There's countless other resources that you've made available for our children, the soft structures, the peopleware, whatever you want to call it, okay? The mortar that goes between all the bricks. And that was an enormous investment also. So as we enter into the budget season tonight, I'd like you to think of yourselves as homeowners. Geez, what a novel idea. But homeowners whose land, real estate, education estate are all these acres, and all the kids that you serve on these acres that you've built together. And I'd like you to be as possessive and proud of this infrastructure that you've built as we move through a budget season. I'd also like to call your attention to what I'm going to call value-added factors. Value-added factors, I'll give you for an example. A couple of them came up tonight, thanks to Ms. Gosh. So when you hear people around this table go beyond the dollars and cents and talk to you about IB, International Baccalaureate, that's value-added. That's not something that we had to do. In fact, in December of 1999, we couldn't even spell IB, being facetious and comical. The fact of the matter is, we had to learn these things, we had to choose to go after them, we had to invest to make them realities. And as homeowners now, you kind of own this, okay? You're going to hear us talking a lot about STEM, and everybody in this room by now should know. Science, technology, E stands for engineering, you got it, and M stands for? Excellent. And if I threw an A in there, what would that stand for? I love it. Whew. Okay, and if I talk to you about SCP, you would all say strategic planning. Again, when we went to school 100 years ago, which was even before 1999, 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now 4 C's and an A. Okay, and the A stands for adaptability. You can figure out the 4 C's. But these are quality indicators of the value added in the Brewster educational package today. Some of them are in the dollars and cents that Victor will be sharing with us. Some of them are the culture that we've created for ourselves and our children. There are other things that you know that we are always proud of course. Our sports program was a strength forever. What we chose to do smartly is build some fields for them, which we're not done with, and we're mindful of that. Okay? I've called it, and I hope you will remember this much, your sports fields are the 7th classroom. My background is a psychologist, there's no hiding that, okay? I'm a little crazy, you know that. But your fields are your 7th classroom because that's where it all comes together. The body and the mind come together in a well-coordinated sports program, and I'm pointing out the left field where Mr. Barato hangs out, okay? Because he's one of those dedicated people that we have, that we're blessed to have, not the only one, who helps bring all the silos together for children. Oh, by the way, that's what strategic coherence planning is, bringing all the silos together. Okay, so enough, you get the theme. What I'm asking you to do is pay attention beyond the dollars and the cents and how they add up. Look for the value added and be proud when you see all the things beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic that we've chosen to do here in Brewster Central Schools. Thank you. Okay, so now we move on to presentations, recognition, and discussion. And the first among them are the BCLC presentation. Ms. Harrington, I think you're helping us out with that. And Ms. Kowaleski, thank you both. Have a great night, ladies.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Denise Harrington Cohen, and one of my roles is overseeing the Brewster Community Learning Center. Before I begin, I would just like to recognize Ms. Donna Turallo, who is our welcomer and supporter of our students and support team, and students and instructional team, and she's been with us almost a year, and she runs the day-to-day operations of the community center. And also Anne-Marie Kowaleski, who came on board about 2 months ago. She has deep roots in the community and has done a fabulous job already, and she'll be discussing some things later on before we go on. So the Brewster Community Learning Center, where we began. So the Brewster Community Learning Center was introduced by Dr. Valerie Henning-Piedmont a year ago this month to provide 12-month learning and exploration for students and family members of the Brewster community. Recommendations were sought from the community as far as programming and instructors, and we put together a program that was designed based on the needs and desires of the community. And we started with these wonderful 4 instructors who are still with us today. They are not only teaching the introductory courses that they started with, digital photography, mindfulness of knitting, adventures around Putnam, and introduction to yoga, but because of their quality classes and strong community support, they are now doing intermediate and advanced courses as well. So where does the money come from? Since the inception of the program, far sooner than we had ever anticipated, our program revenues have sustained our entire instructional payroll, as long as the operational costs related to our program manual creation, the printing, and mailing, etc. We also receive Community Schools Aid. Community Schools Aid is provided to communities who have the desire and need to grow in the area of academic, social, and health services based on need. So the understanding is that if these support services are provided, that student outcomes will be enhanced. And I think that we've seen that. For the 18-19 school year, these $150,000 have been targeted to 2 areas. One, to endow families to receive a reduced tuition for our summer YMCA program, which is a fabulous program. Last year we ran the program and it was fully funded through tuition revenue and federal grants and community schools aid. The second function of those funds for the 18-19 school year will be to administer health services for the community. We're now working with the YMCA and developing partnerships with other health services agencies to have screenings, maybe vaccination program or dental program, just one-time clinic or possibly something more standing. The summer food service program is an integral part of our program. It provides, the summer food service program is administered by the State Education Department, but it's a federal funded program, and it provides free lunch and breakfast for students who are, for programs that have 50% or more free and reduced eligible students. There are some strict guidelines and adherence that our food service department needs to adhere to, but there are basically two sites. The open enrollment site, which is the program that we operated at St. Lawrence O'Toole last summer, and that is a closed site, and we're currently exploring the feasibility of continuing that program or opening a comparable program. The closed enrollment site is what we operated through the YMCA program last summer. And essentially what that means is if 50% or more of eligible free and reduced lunch students are in the program, that all students receive free and reduced lunch. So that is very valuable to our Brewster families. Partnerships. As you can imagine, communication and collaboration is the key to the success of this program. We have a lot of shared space, and our goal is to not only work with these local agencies, the agencies that make Brewster the strong community that it is, but also to complement their programs as well. So we are working with the Town of Southeast Recreation Department, Community Y of Northern Westchester, Putnam CAP, Putnam Communities That Care Coalition, Westcon University. We get a lot of support from the Brewster High School organizations. And as you can see from some of these icons, we've had some very exciting programming. We had the District YMCA program in the summer. We had the Family University, which was an evening of parent workshop, motivational speakers. We had some exercise classes, etc. And then also the Festival of Cultures, which I'm going to show you a very brief video. That was in December. So as you can see, this is a program that not only strengthens relationships with individuals that know each other in the community, but also broadens everyone's reach, and that's a good thing for our community. So I am going to pass this to Anne Marie Kovaleski.
Hi. All right, so I came in just a couple months ago, but in coming in, we've seen, just learning some of the background at BCLC, I see we kind of graphed out where we were started and where we are now. Obviously, we started with the 4 courses Denise mentioned in the beginning, and this winter we offered 15. Our registrants have grown to over about 400% roughly. Our spring brochures are currently out. We are offering about 25 courses at the moment, and we are about 70 to 80%, I believe, full at this time. So, you know, we're getting there. And our summer program, we had early registration night about a month ago, and we are already at 50% capacity. So we can house about 100 students there, and, you know, we're about 50 to 60. So we're doing pretty well.
If I can interject for a second. As you can see, evidenced in these numbers, Brewster is a community that clearly values lifelong learning, and that not only has a profound impact on individuals, but I was just reading a study, and the transformational impact of that mentality and that lifestyle has has ramifications on generations. So we're laying some good groundwork here.
Okay, so where we're headed, obviously as the Community Learning Center with the district behind us, we have incorporated what is important to us as a district family, is strategic coherence plan. We want our learning center to adapt to the needs and the interests of the community. We obviously talked about partnerships, communicating, collaborating with our local agencies to enhance this life learning opportunities. Problem solve. Obviously, courses don't work. We want to figure out ways to make them work or find another program that might best suit our families. Think critically. How do we outreach to get more people here, get more people involved, persevere, and you know, we want to make this. We're a year in, but we want this to be a lifelong thing, so we want to keep going, and then remain resilient to our commitments, and you know, use our leverage. Over 75% of our instructors currently are Brewster residents, so that's key. And then we'd like to incorporate, as we go forward, some more project-based learning into our programs. We were supposed to present a couple weeks ago, so we were going to invite you to this party, but you missed it. But it was fun. This is where we're going. Obviously, spring is going to start April 12th, the week of April 12th. Now we're already starting to look and plan for summer. You know, we want to bring some more things on board: art classes, music, parenting, health and wellness, language. Transitional support programs for individuals re-entering the workforce, retirement families that are in retirement now, some things for their planning, retirement investment planning, things of such nature. Socially, we'd like some fun things too, some card games, book clubs, and we'd like to look into some courses to offer for students in addition to what we currently have for SATs, TASC, which is formerly GED, and ACTs. And then, lastly, this was the party you missed. One thing to point out here, we received a proclamation from Senator Murphy. One of his aides was able to bring it to our evening and presented it to us. And Mrs. Cohen presents it to Valerie on behalf of Senator Murphy, congratulating the BCLC on its first year anniversary. And then we had PTA hosted a bingo for some families that were part of the program and have been in the program, and we had some fun cake and stuff. Sorry. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
And this is the proclamation from Senator Murphy. So on behalf of his office, he's resolved as I, duly elected member of the Senate of the State of New York, on behalf of the citizens, therefore duly congratulate the Brewster Community Learning Center upon its one-year anniversary. And Senator Murphy's been instrumental because he's the one that made available the community grant. So we want to thank him for that.
And if you'd like a course to be offered, reach out to Amory, or if you'd like to teach a course, do the same. And if you haven't taken one, please do. Thank you.
So there was a phrase there that Ms. Harrington used, which is important to underscore. A community that creates a sense that learning is important, not just in the classroom, but throughout the whole community, becomes a very attractive community for people looking around as to where to move. Think about that. We move our attention now to the second presentation, which will be very brief, and we'll have a discussion by the board later when we consider it as an action item. This second one is the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, which represents all 54 school boards in this general area of Westchester and Putnam, has recently put together a template, which they usually do, on matters that they feel are important for our consideration. And the template, which is included in your packets, has to do with school safety resolution. And rather than read through the whole thing, I would just summarize for your benefit what you probably already know, that there's a lot of concern out there right now concerning school safety. As stewards, you folks on the board are considered the stewards of public education in this community. So you're being asked basically here, what is your position on helping to ensure that we have safe school measures in place now for the protection of our students? So there are a number of whereases here included in this measure. But the most important thing is that through these 1.5 pages of whereases, we're really saying that the safety and security of our children is fundamentally important to us, and that we as a Board of Education are supporting that and asking that the powers that be, all the folks who are legislators that sit in all of the rows above our heads, treat this matter with respect in the deliberations and the conversations that should be forthcoming in the weeks and months ahead of us all. Having said that, now we'll be coming back to this when we do the action items. But at this point in time, I cannot delay any further, Mr. Carlson. You're batter up.
Thank you, Victor.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation tonight. We're going to be discussing our revenues, our general support, and our employee benefits, and show you some of the challenges that we're facing this year. We'll begin with environmental stress. So the State Controller's Office has an objective measure for identifying school districts that are facing both fiscal stress and environmental stress. And I'm pleased to report that Brewster is not facing fiscal stress. However, they have identified certain factors that are creating environmental stress. And I believe Dr. Henning will get into that as we show our changing demographics.
One of the environmental stresses has to do with the changing demographics. And environmental stress is a state term, so it's not mine, so I don't want to say it to offend anyone. But the state has identified these specific areas, and you've seen these slides every year that we present it. Our economically disadvantaged population, which are children or families who receive free and reduced lunch, has increased from 2010 to 2011 to the current, most recent year, 2016-2017, to be 33%. Since 2007, 2008, that number was about 9%, a little under 10%. It's now up to 33%. And that represents about a 21% increase in the numbers of families who receive free and reduced lunch in the community. And that is a stressor on the district because it does, at times, not that it always occurs, where a child who's economically disadvantaged also has learning needs, but that does tend to happen, and so that means that districts do have an added burden of trying to close gaps in the event that economics is an impact on learning and the availability of resources in the family to help the child. The other economic or stressor, environmental stressor, is the amount to, or the cost to districts to educate students with disabilities. They cost more, and again, that's not supposed to be a disparaging classification, but it does cost more to ensure class sizes are smaller, to ensure that there are potentially more adults in classrooms, we have co-teaching models, more services that are attached to those children, and that's just a fact. So that isn't anything that I think most people are not aware of. And again, our classification rate has kind of remained steady, vacillating between sometimes 12% to 13%. Our English as a new language learners have been coming in steadily from Central America. Again, you can see very clearly from 2010 and 11, 4%, it's doubled. Now 8% of our student population consists of students whose first language is not English. Often enough in that group of young people, the older they are, the wider the gaps in terms of education. The students, you might have heard of the term SIFE, significant interruptions in formal education, meaning that some children who come to the district could be 16 or 17 and maybe have only been in school for 3 years. And that obviously costs more in terms of us trying to mitigate against those gaps in their education. So all of those are the classic examples from the state that impact districts, and we're not the only ones, but certainly this is an area that we have to pay attention to.
I also just want to add to that, with each of these three different areas of need, we are aided by the federal government and the state government. Denise mentioned earlier that we're receiving $150,000 for community schools aid. That's a direct result of our increase in economically disadvantaged students. We receive IDEA funding from the federal government to help offset the costs of our special education costs. And also we receive Title III funding for our English as a new language students. So it's largely offset by federal grants.
Another environmental stressor is class size at this is the classification that the state provides, nursery schools at 6th grade level. Our class size policy, which was adopted in 2009, indicates a range for children at the kindergarten through 5 level. The kindergarten range is 18 to 22 students. That's not an issue. The state indicates that it should be 22. Grades 1 through 3 is the range is 21 to 24, and grades 4 to 5 it's 23 to 27. New York State indicates that that number should be 24. So we're well above that for the intermediate level. And certainly you can ask anybody in the intermediate level and they can confirm that. And that's a stress. If the class sizes are larger, we're trying to meet the mandate of least restrictive learning environment. We're trying to make sure that we have STEM, which requires more resources and materials in the classroom, more students up, moving around, building and doing things. That definitely puts a stress on the system. So class size is a consideration for the board in terms of looking at the intermediate level. 27 as the high end, as the end is certainly much higher than what the state is asking for, which is 24.
And also, just to put it in perspective, we've now just joined Carmel and Pauling, who are also identified as environmentally stressed, so it's not foreign to districts surrounding us. Other challenges that we face are state aid uncertainty. The state is facing its own budget gap of $4 billion. That's billion with a B. So obviously the trickle down onto the education portion of their budget is a strain on our budget development. We're entering year 7 of the allowable tax levy legislation, which is more commonly known as the tax cap. So the state is, the state controls our state aid. They also control our tax levy increase. Despite those challenges, we're implementing a bold strategic coherence plan.
And that plan includes some of the very things that were described. The International Baccalaureate is one of those because the skills are very much aligned to our strategic coherence plan, where we're preparing children for a world in which just knowing content is not enough for children to be successful. They have to be able to do things with the content, solve problems, think critically, persevere, be adaptive, highly adaptive in a very rapidly changing world. We're in our 3rd year of the implementation of the Teachers College Reading Writing Workshop Project. That requires ongoing professional learning because it's a model that you can never get perfect at, and it requires teachers to develop and adapt units of study and lessons. So that requires time and attention and resources. Obviously, it depends a great deal on classroom libraries, so those classroom libraries need to be replenished regularly over the course of a K-5 experience. You've heard about Project Lead the Way. Project Lead the Way is our STEM initiative. It's one of several. We're also going to be able to use at no cost to the taxpayer in the 18-19 school year the Jason Learning STEM project, which is web-based, exposes students to real-life scientists. And there's also opportunities to do some real explorations outside in the community.
All of those require resources. They also require professional learning. We just can't open the box and say to teachers, here, go and do that. We have to make sure that they have the professional learning, and we have to provide the resources. And some of the resources are also devices that are required for certain engineering or design or forensics courses that are part of Project Lead the Way. But that's the way in which we provide the kinds of courses that really enrich children and ensure that they are prepared so that when they do leave, they have had their engineering experiences and their design experiences and all of those kinds of things.
So the state has about 8 formulas that they use to determine what our state aid will be. The largest formula that the state uses to fund us is something called foundation aid. And the state, over the past 10 years, has been unable to actually pay us what they've promised us. So this chart shows the red line represents how much the state promised us, and the blue line represents the amount that they actually sent to us. And there's a $4 million gap annually between what the state promised us and what we actually receive. Obviously, that's very difficult for schools across the state in developing their budget because we could really use that money. In addition to our state aid, the state also controls our tax cap through the allowable tax levy legislation. This is a chart that shows a 5-year history of our tax levy increases. It's ranged from 2.3% down to 1.3%. 5-year average increase has been 1.95%. And for the 18-19 school year, the maximum allowable tax levy is 2.22%. I want to note that that's an increase from our February 27th presentation. We spoke to our friends at the State Ed Department. They provided us with some updated information with regard to our building aid. And the new allowable tax cap figure is 2.22%. I also want to note that over the past 7 years since the tax cap came into play, the district has not only complied with the tax cap, but it's actually beat the tax cap, meaning we've come under the tax cap to the tune of $1.1 million cumulatively over the past 7 years. So, while that is something that we are all very happy with, we're entering a very difficult budget season, and we could really use that money. However, through our self-imposed restraint, we've not levied taxes up to the amount allowable, and instead we are essentially $1.1 million behind where we would have been had we met the tax cap every year.
Mr. Carlson,
Yes, sir.
please, could you go back to the previous slide? So could you explain to the people, I don't know, I'm dying to hear the explanation, how does the state figure that this is what they're going to give us?
Right. So the state developed a formula based on census data.
2000.
That's extremely old. The state also, because they were unable to implement the formula, going back 2 years ago, in addition to not being able to pay us the foundation aid that they promised us, they also levied another charge against us, something called the gap elimination adjustment. So I'm sure you recall that from previous budget conversations.
I also recall it cost us $11 million.
Correct. $11 million that we will never see.
Never seen.
So each year we're struggling with the fact that the state is not providing us with the funding that they're promising us. And it forces us to make difficult decisions in order to balance our budget.
So last comment, and this is the state, uniquely, in its state constitution says that a free public education is a constitutionally guaranteed right in New York State. They have yet to put their money where their words are. And I can say this because I'm walking away now, okay? So they don't even find me. But you ought to be as angry as I am walking out the door, because this has been a terrible, lousy struggle with a bunch of honest folks out there who are working their best to get their school system up to a decent running speed. If you can't count on that red line, what can you count on? And how, by the way, do you build a budget not knowing what your red line numbers are going to really be? Sorry.
It's difficult.
I'll be quiet.
Can I actually add to that slide?
Sure.
And the fact that because we were able to be under the tax cap, there's been a refund
Correct, correct.
Which, yeah, so the savings has been.
Right, that is a good point. So because of that restraint, the governor proposed a tax refund to all homeowners within the Brewster Central School District for our ability to not only stay within the tax cap, but to beat the tax cap again. So for each of the past 3 years, I believe homeowners should have received a refund from the state government for property taxes. Good point. So here are the main budget drivers. Ironically, the state also controls the teachers' retirement system and the employee retirement system contribution rates. So despite the fact that the teachers' retirement system in particular had a 12.5% investment return, which is very good, they've increased the district's contribution by 8.5%, which is very challenging for us. So they're controlling our revenue budget in the form of the state aid and also in form of the tax cap. State aid, you'll see in a minute, is increasing 2.9%. Tax cap up 2.2%, yet our expenditures in this regard are up 8.5%. So they're hitting us from both sides. They're limiting our revenue growth and they're increasing our expenditure growth. Another challenge that we face is our health insurance premiums. We have a premium increase of 3.7%, which is actually relatively good compared to other plans that are offered throughout the state. Swiss Chip is another major plan, and Nice Chip is another major plan. At a 3.7% increase, it's actually pretty good relative to what's happening throughout the state. However, we also have newly insured employees. About 10 years ago, when the recession began, the district took an approach where we were hiring employees on a part-time basis. And we learned as the economy improved that we could not attract or retain part-time employees. So we are now in the process of hiring full-time employees, which is good for the district. It's good for operations, for consistency. However, there's a cost associated with these newly insured employees. And as we just discussed, our limited state aid and tax levy. So here's a look at our revenue budget summary. As you can see, tax levy makes up the majority of our revenue budget at $74.1 million. That's an increase of 2.2%, again, within the tax cap. Local sources are interest, refunds, and pilots, which have increased about $400,000 or 48%. Pilot is an acronym for a payment in lieu of tax. It's an arrangement made between the industrial development agency or the town or a county in order to entice a business to operate within the tax base. It's in lieu of them going on the tax roll. So instead of them paying property taxes, they instead have an agreement to pay another fixed amount. It happens over a period of 10 years. It's good for the businesses and it's also good for the towns because it entices businesses to move within the towns. Our state and federal aid is increasing about $600,000 or 2.9%. And I also want to note that of those, I mentioned earlier that the state aid there are about 8 different aid formulas. So although our overall state aid is increasing 2.9%, certain of those funds are earmarked for things like our debt associated with our capital projects, special education costs, transportation costs, etc. BOCES aid.
BOCES aid is really important. We're encouraged by the state of New York, which is a good thing, to engage in co-service agreements with our Putnam North and Westchester BOCES, and it ranges from any number of services, whether it's curriculum or it's aid for the use of individuals, property, you name it. And that's important for the districts because districts don't have to then initiate contracts on their own. And so there is a portion or reimbursement that districts receive. So you'll see many, many more contracts that are BOCES initiated contracts so that we can take advantage of the co-service agreements and therefore receive more aid at the end of the year.
Our appropriated fund balance is the portion of our savings that we use to offset expenditures of the following year. We're allocating $2.7 million, which is the same amount that we allocated last year. It's important to note that this represents roughly 3% of our budget, and that's a good benchmark that the controller has set out. If you've read any controller's audits of any municipalities or school districts, they don't want schools appropriating an excessive amount of fund balance because then that's not sustainable. So 3% is a good benchmark in this industry. Lastly, we discussed this at the February 13th meeting where we talked about the status of our capital projects and that we still have some unfinished business. We discussed the paving project at JFK Elementary School, which we would need to allocate a one-time allocation of $960,000 to the capital fund to complete this. Our architects provided us a not-to-exceed budget figure, so any amount not spent on the paving project would then go back to the general fund. So this has actually a net zero impact on the budget. It has no impact on the taxpayer because we're using our accumulated savings to pay for this portion of the project. Our total revenue budget is $99 million, an increase of $3.6 million or 3.7%. Absent this one-time transfer to pay for our paving project, the budget increase would be 2.7%, which is right in line with prior years.
Just to add, this particular fund balance, that's the requirement, right? You have to have a certain, there's different fund balances that we have.
Correct. This is our unreserved fund balance. This is the amount that's allowed to be used on emergency projects like we saw this past winter, repairing the fields and other needs. So where does the funding come from? The property taxes, including STAR, make up 75% of our budget, again controlled by the state through the tax cap. State and federal aid makes up 20% of our budget, again controlled by the state. So again, they control 95% of our revenue budget. We have very little discretion or control in how we develop our budgets. Appropriated fund balance, which again is using our savings account to offset future years, makes up about 4% of the budget. There's no increasing that. And local sources make up just 1% of our budget. Here's a look at our general support budget on the expenditure side. Board of Ed, district meetings, superintendent's office, finance office increased just 1.8%. That's due to salary increases. HR, personnel, legal, and public info increased 3.5%. That's due to our outreach to our community to show them all the great things that we're doing. Operations and maintenance, we reviewed at our February 27th meeting, increasing 2.9% or $148,000. That's due largely to an increase in our utility expenses for natural gas and electric. Central data processing and printing increased $34,000 or 6.7%. This is due to an increase in technology purchases, both hardware and software, due to needs that were identified during a technology audit. So we want to make sure that all of our data is safe and secure. Insurance for property and casualty remains flat at $350,000, which is a good thing. School association dues also remain flat at $16,000. Claims and tax refunds when homeowners challenge their assessment and the assessors choose agree with the petitioner, we refund taxes. This is where we pay for that. I'll also note that we do have a tax certiorari reserve that any amounts in excess of what we have budgeted, we're able to draw down from a reserve fund to pay those claims. Our BOCES administrative and capital charge increased $24,000 or 4.8%. That was due largely to an increase in the BOCES capital charge. They established a capital reserve to address future needs and repairs over at their campuses, and that represents our payment to the BOCES. Each of the component school districts that are components of Putnam Northern BOCES, Carmel, Mahopac, Yorktown, etc., all pay into the BOCES in order for them to function. Our total general support budget is about $9.2 million, an increase of $263,000 or 2.9%. Now we'll look at our employee benefits budget. As I mentioned, the state controls the pension contribution rates for the school districts. ERS applies to non-certificated staff, such as bus drivers, cleaners, monitors, child nutrition employees, teacher aides, nurses, etc. TRS applies to, is the teacher's retirement system, it applies to certificated staff like teachers and teaching assistants and administrators. The sum of those two budgets is about $5.8 million, an increase of $212,000 or 3.8%. The ERS system actually had a slight decrease in the contribution rate. However, that was obviously largely offset by the increase in the TRS rate. Social Security increased by about $102,000 or 2.6%. That's right in line with the increases in salaries across the district. Dental, health, and other benefits increased by $1 million or 7.3%. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the premium increases for health insurance went up 3.7%. In addition to that, we also have a number of newly insured employees. So our total employee benefits budget is $24.7 million, an increase of $1.3 million or 5.7%. As you can see, a lot of our resources are going to these contractually obligated costs, pension, Social Security, and health insurance. So as this little girl is pondering, this just doesn't add up. So you'll see that many of these things we have little to no control over, yet we're required to develop a balanced budget. So on the left side of the screen here, we have our revenue drivers. Again, the state is controlling 95% of our revenues. So this is, in large part, out of our hands. We are allowed to increase our tax cap by $1.6 million. Our state aid is increasing by about $550,000. But again, as I mentioned, those are largely earmarked for certain things like, our debt on our buildings and special education costs and transportation costs. Other revenues, this represents that pilot arrangement that I spoke about earlier. This money is actually available to the district. And then we have a one-time allocation of our accumulated savings or our fund balance of $960,000, but we're paying that directly for the JFK paving project. Those two are a net zero budget impact. Again, no additional cost to the taxpayer, but no additional funds for program growth. So our total projected revenue budget increase is about $3.5 million. Now let's just review some of the things that we discussed tonight to see how that $3.5 million is being consumed. Pension and Social Security contributions increased $314,000. Dental, health, and other benefits are increasing a little over $1 million. Our debt payments are increasing $928,000. We reviewed this back on February 27. And again, the paving project is offset by our one-time appropriated fund balance allocation. So the sum of just these really three categories here is consuming $3.2 million of the $3.5 million that's available for next year's budget. And those three categories only make up really 33% of our total expenditure budget, meaning we only have $351,000 available for the other 2/3. So needless to say, we're in a very difficult position with this year's budget, most, if not all of which, these items are beyond our control. The state is controlling our tax cap, $1.6 million. The state controls our state aid, $500,000. We're fortunate that we have a pilot agreement of $440,000 coming in. However, things that are beyond our control, pension, social security contributions, dental, health, and other benefits, which are contractually obligated, and debt payments, which are also obligated. So again, we're in a very difficult position here because our resources are being largely consumed by just 33% of our budget. So this doesn't add up, and it's not sustainable.
So we have a few ways in which we are approaching closing this gap. One already started with the 18-19 school budget. So Victor met with every budget manager and reduced the budgets to the bare bones. So every budget has been diminished already to levels where it's only what the schools need to operate. Attrition is the other way in which we hope to close the gap. We have 2 retirement incentives that we presented to our administrative unit and our teachers association. We're hoping that some of our employees who will have 10, 20, 30 or more years of service and are eligible to retire, and then eligibility age is 55, but they take advantage of that plan. Those are since that, as a result of that longevity, obviously those are employees who make a considerable amount of money, and by taking an early retirement or a retirement incentive, that certainly helps us, because then we can hire newer teachers that cost less. The other has to do with shared services, as Victor mentioned earlier. We'll continue to look at BOCES for opportunities to engage in co-service agreements, so that we continue to cut down on costs where we can, to share costs, and take full advantage of those services.
Obviously, a very important consideration when we develop a budget is our class size. So we begin with JFK. You can see that we project around 200 students to be enrolled in kindergarten next year. We are currently at 180, with 2 more days of registration to go. Dr. Zamperlin has mentioned that we have been around 195 or 196 for the last few years. So we propose to keep 9 sections in each grade level. And you see we actually would go down slightly in first and second grade in terms of class size. At CD Star Intermediate School, we are also recommending that we keep the same number of sections, which should relieve a little bit of the higher class size in 5th grade. Dr. Henry Piedmont spoke about when the environmental stressors being class size. We saw that particularly in CD Star. So it is our hope that with the same amount of sections, the projected average class size will decrease. Moving on into the secondary schools, for Henry H. Wells, it gets a little bit more complicated to calculate these. But basically, if we look at all of the English, Math, Science, Social Studies, and World Language sections, not counting self-contained sections, not counting self-contained in terms of special education or E&L, and we add up the number of students and the number of sections. Here are the class sizes that we see for 2017-18. Henry H. Wells will actually see an increase next year because that current 5th grade group is large, but they're able to absorb that into their 6th grade, making their 6th grade class size a little bit higher, but still well within the policy range. What you'll see, and you might wonder why enrollment's different depending on course. That could be because of some students being in self-contained, for special education, could be for E&L services. It depends really, once you get into the secondary level, courses become more specialized. And so that's why the numbers fluctuate somewhat. And heading into Brewster High School. Again, it gets even more complicated with the specialized class size, but what we did here is we took the number of students enrolled in each of the English, Math, Science, Social Studies, and World Language, and divided it by the number of sections. You'll see that the number of sections vary because there are a different number of staff, FTE, allocated per department, but also because some courses require more FTE or full-time equivalent than others. So that's why you see some fluctuation and some variation there. You can see for 2017-18 and into 18-19, where enrollment will actually decline at the high school, that we are well below the class size policy guidelines.
In terms of the class size presentation, we frequently have lots of conversations over the summer. After we look at the numbers of students who come into the district, primarily from Central America, there are children who may not be in the district or may not be in the state of New York or the country in June, but over the summer, in the last couple of years, we've had increases in the range of 15 students at each of the schools. We, of course, verify our residency. We actually intensified our efforts to verify residency
The central registrar, who started a couple of months ago, spends quite a bit of time working with the transportation department to make sure that when we learn from anyone in the community that they suspect that there are residents who are not legitimate in the district, we pursue that aggressively to make sure that we are identifying anyone who may be in the district and may not have appropriate residence. So we certainly are paying attention to a lot of the activity over the summer and throughout the year, so that, again, we're making sure that we are not allowing students who don't belong in the district to be educated in the district.
Okay, and that brings us to our next topic, proposition number 2, bus purchases. We reviewed this on February 27th, so I'll be brief in the update, but for the past 5 years, the district has wisely committed to a fleet replacement plan to address the needs of our aging fleet. And this chart here shows the current age spread of aging buses. We have a 108 vehicle fleet. And as you can see, we've got 22% of our vehicles, or 24, that are age 16 and older. And when a bus becomes that age, it becomes very difficult to find parts and also very expensive to repair it. So what we've committed to is a fleet replacement plan, which identifies about a third of our buses that should be categorized in each of these 5-year age spreads, with just 1% of our buses being age 16 and older. So this group of 24 buses we're very anxious about, because we know that it's just a matter of time before they fall out of service. So in order to take a look back of how we got into the predicament that we're in now, we are going to look at the history of our bus purchases. So for some time period leading up until the 01-02 school year, we had not purchased any number of vehicles. And what that did was create somewhat of a fiscal cliff that forced the district into purchasing 23 vehicles in a single year. And that is a multi-million-dollar spike that we're attempting to avoid by adopting a fleet replacement plan which shows a level and consistent approach to our buses. So looking back on 03-04, there were another, and 02-03, there were 2 more years in which 0 buses were purchased, which likely led to this spike in 05-06, in which 16 buses were purchased. Again, we had another spike in 07-08, and what we're trying to do through our fleet replacement plan is to avoid those multi-million-dollar spikes in purchases, and also to avoid these lulls in purchases which create those spikes. So for the past 5 years, the district, again, is committed to a fleet replacement plan, and that's evidenced by these minimal bus purchases over the past few years, and our projection continues into the future to address, again, those 24 vehicles that are over age 16 currently. So we are proposing to borrow $754,000 to purchase 4 30-passenger vehicles, 2 48-passenger vehicles, and 2 77-passenger vehicles. And you'll notice that there's different types of vehicles that are being proposed for purchase, and that's due to the different areas in the district that in which these buses will be used. Obviously, a 77-passenger bus is best used in a highly dense population. A 30-passenger bus is better used in a I guess more narrow road area, neighborhood. So we're aided by New York State. Again, one of those different aid categories that we receive money from the state. One is transportation aid. So we're aided by New York State for about 47% of the purchase. So essentially that amounts to a buy one, get one free. The first of 5 annual payments isn't due until 2019-20 and not 2018-19. So we make the purchase in 18-19, however, the first payment is not due until the next budget. Our projected annual cost is about $89,000 net of state aid, and the annual cost to the average Southeast and Patterson homeowners is just $8 and $6 respectively. So, yes.
2 things. So just to point out that the previous slide, the 754, so we put the proposition up, we have to put the full cost, even though 47% of that is aided.
Correct.
So it's not a true reflection of what ultimately comes back to the taxpayer.
Correct. The net cost is approximately 47% of that, of course, with interest, because we're borrowing to not pay the buses.
Right. And then just to also add, I know we've discussed this in the past when we've done homework for different options. and looking at what other districts might do in renting and things, but this came out to be a more cost-effective way because we can control the buses
Absolutely.
and maintain them. And
Yeah, leasing buses is always more expensive than owning them, especially when we're going to do it over a period of 15 years. It's always a better proposal to purchase the buses.
Just one question. Is there any rhyme or reason to the fact that the state appears to be pretty generous with respect to its aid for bus purchases and pretty stingy with respect to its aid for the
There is great irony in that, and we have a different aid ratio for each of those different categories. So I mentioned there are about 8 different state aid formulas. So while we receive 47% on transportation aid, and I believe we receive almost 65% on BOCES aid, the state is then very stringent on foundation aid, which is really the bread and butter of our state aid. Foundation aid makes up over 50% of our state aid revenue in total.
It's need driven.
yeah.
Right. But you're right, it is not wrong. No, not a good answer. So at this point, we're still early in our, relatively early in our budget development. We still don't know what our final state aid allocation will be. The state's budget is due April 1st. We're hoping that we'll get some more money from the state, but again, given their constraints and the fact that they're facing a $4 billion with a B budget gap, it's unlikely that we're going to receive much more in state aid than we have in the past.
We talked about enrollment, where we certainly have a lot of information. If you're in the district and at the end of the school year in June, we know, that more or less you're going to end up in a section somewhere in one of the schools. But if we have activity over the summer, that's less of a way for us to predict accurately, and that does have an impact, and it's one of those environmental stressors that we talked about earlier. And reviews are underway for our students with disabilities, so we will certainly need to wait to see what the outcome will be of those decisions, so that certainly will drive section development and whether or not certain students may need more or less restricted learning environments. We hope less restricted. Obviously, we're waiting for some recognition that perhaps others are interested in the retirement incentives. So it's 2 days away from the deadline, so we'll wait and see, and we'll have to get back to you on how many of those we receive.
Right, and based on that, and CSEs will know what our required staffing level is, and always our year-end fund balance, as we've been trying to project what our fund balance will be at the end of the year. So we will obviously know a lot more. 2 very large items that are coming up are the state budget and the deadline for the retirement notifications. So our next presentation is on April 10th, at which point we will have a full budget to present on budget adoption. May 5th is the informational budget hearing, and May 15th is the annual budget vote. Please come out to vote. Encourage your friends and neighbors to come out and vote. And visit our website for this presentation and previous presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, questions to the community or just to the board?
We're not adopting it now, so.
You could go.
Was it the end?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What's your pleasure?
We're not voting. We're not voting, so.
So what's the answer?
Waiting for the end.
Well,
We're
yeah,
waiting till the end of the public
Yeah.
comment section.
right, we do public comments and, so, public comments and review. Okay, so we're moving forward now to our action items. Our action items tonight begin with the aforementioned approval of the Brewster Central School District School Safety Resolution, which is in your packet. Again, it's asking school boards around the state, in New York State in particular, at this time, to take a position in recommending that our legislators in Congress, both houses, pay attention to the need for increased safety and security in our schools. And it's a little bit like apple pie, basically. I think we've all gotten pretty tired of the violence, gotten pretty tired of our moments of silence, and we're all feeling extremely weakened in our ability to affect change in protecting our children. It's our primary goal as a society. So our hope is, in the world of school boards, that our united voice here in Brewster, joined with the other 53 voices of our surrounding school districts, can help to make a difference, basically. I'll leave the floor open for the board to discuss questions or comments.
I just actually, because it is lengthy, I didn't want to read the whole thing, but I wanted to point out 3 particular whereases.
Okay.
The first one just commenting on how, whereas the proposed 5% reduction to the current federal education budget would include $425 million in cuts to mental health and school safety. And so that's something that we're asking them, of course, to not do.
Correct. That's
and
important.
2 other comments which I think are important, because it helps it be specific to every district. Whereas we believe that every child has the right to a safe school environment that has an appropriate level of security as determined by our community. And whereas a coordinated effort at the federal and state levels, boosted by law enforcement and community engagement, is needed to change the paradigm and protect our communities and our schools. So I think it's good that it includes actual community language, which I haven't often seen. It's usually just more school district related, but they've included some language, so I think that.
Well, that's an excellent point that you're making, Sonia, and it goes back to our theme for the night. Look for value-added indicators. And again, the credit comes back to you folks. We were the first district on the block to have an SRO in an elementary school when Garden Street was still in operation. You folks decided to make that investment because you folks felt it was important. And as it turns out, you were ahead of the curve. So we have a very, and I know you went to a presentation just recently and you heard from the SROs themselves, and judging from the feedback, I think you're satisfied with that level of safety and security. But we have to be ever vigilant. I mean, there are a lot of crazy bad folks out there.
Steve, just one more thing. I think what's also important about the resolution is that it recognizes the fact that this violence in the schools is a result of a multitude of factors.
Correct.
And not just the guns, but it's the guns and it's the mental wellness of the students and the security of the schools and a host of other factors. But I do think that it's important that the resolution recognizes that it's a confluence of various factors and not one factor.
It's a great point, and I'm glad you made it and not me. So my background is I'm a psychologist, and I have fought my whole career in trying to get people to believe an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Front-loaded. Younger, the better, mental health, and you won't get into the correctives that you have to do thereafter. It's as simple as that. And by the way, ironically, since the market crashed in 2008, whenever, if you look at budget patterns across the state, probably the country, what were the services that were pulled out of budgets first? So that's what they're now saying we need to put back in. Yes, I agree, definitely. Thank you for making that point. It is a mental health issue. Other questions or comments? I'll take a motion then from the board. Thank you, Mary Kay. Thank you, Kristen. Other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The resolution is adopted by the Board of Education of Brewster. Thank you all for your careful consideration of this matter. Action item number 2 pertains to the approval of the bus bond proposition, which Mr. Carlson just presented to us. Take a motion and a second and a discussion, please. Thank you again, Mary Kay. Bring it back to this side here. Diane, questions or comments from the board concerning this matter?
Just to comment that the vote is simply to be in favor or not of just putting it forth to the public for the vote, just to clarify.
That's correct. We're not deciding the matter. We are simply putting it out as a proposition.
And it's also a roll call vote.
It's a roll call vote. Duly noted. Good point. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Nope.
I gotta go one by one.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Capello, your
That's
vote?
what roll
Yes.
call means.
Ms. Cunningham, your vote?
Yes.
Ms. Masika?
Yes.
Ms. Nielsen?
Yes.
And Ms. O'Brien?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 6. Oh, Dr. Jambor, I'm sorry. I left
That's my
that
kind of
out.
evening.
Motion passes 6-0.
Yes, thank you. No problem. Action item number 3 concerns the approval of the intermunicipal agreement, otherwise known as the IMA, with Putnam County regarding property tax collection. Mr. Carlson.
Yes, this is the annual contract with Putnam County, who prepares our tax bills on our behalf.
Sounds straightforward, I guess. I'll take a motion, please, for your consideration of this action item. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Diane. Kerry, you're better up next time. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion passes 7-0. I'm sorry, 6-0. Action item number 4 is the approval of a settlement agreement, A, and B, a JFK change order number ACM-004. Mr. Carlson?
Yes, this is a settlement agreement with one of the contractors that performed deficient work. Our attorneys negotiated a settlement with them in order for them to refund us money, which is in the form of a change order.
Okay. Take a motion, please, from the board concerning this matter. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kerry. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion passes 6-0. Now, these next 2 items kind of go in tandem, but we are going to take them one at a time. And they do concern the potential sale of Garden Street. Potential. There's a lot of legal hurdles coming up. So the first action item is the approval of the resolution for a secret Type 2 action. Mr. Carlson.
This is a required resolution that basically says that the sale of Garden Street would not have a negative impact on the environment.
That's necessary. Okay. So we'll take a motion, please, in a second, and we'll discuss that. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Mary Kay. Motion, seconded, discussion. And we'd like to have the floor participate in this because this is your property that we're talking about. So the secret thing is the only thing we're talking about right now. The second will be the whole sale idea. No questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you mean like similar to the budget, the environmental stress, like of the community, or are we talking just like land, water, air?
Just
Land, water, air?
Correct.
Okay.
2 questions. Other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Wasn't there asbestos that they thought was in Garden Street? Is that the kind of thing you're talking about? Would that be something that we'd have to pay to remove before it was sold?
No, this is related to any improvements that would be made on the sale of the building, or I should say just specifically on the sale of the building.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So who is the potential buyer? We've tried to look up information about the company, and there's limited detail.
I don't know to what extent we can make it.
Kevin Callahan can speak to that.
Mr. Callahan? Mr. Callahan has been with us for 50 years trying to sell this building.
I'm Kevin Callahan with Covington Commercial Realty. The buyer is Daniel Martin. They are a developer. He is a developer from New York City. He's currently working on a residential project in Ossining. He has worked for other companies that have done development. Going through the building with Daniel, he fully understands what it will take to redevelop Garden Street School into what he's looking to do as a market rate residential rental project. Most of the people I've spoken to, it's a matter of seeing if they do have the background and experience. And walking through Garden Street, you can get a really good feeling if someone really knows what needs to be done. So they will be able to get the project done.
I thought it was supposed to be for education going forward. I thought that it was always supposed to be an
No,
education.
you're talking about the deed restrictions?
Yeah.
The deed restrictions are removed in order to sell the property, and the deed restrictions apply to property next door with Wells Park and another parcel that was with a house nearby. The deed restrictions were removed in order to sell the property. Nobody would purchase the property if there were deed restrictions on the property.
Well, I know there was, the World Heritage Foundation was looking at it.
Yes, they were. And if they had funds, Sadie Purcell would be purchasing it. Had many conversations with her and other nonprofits, and really, I tried a number of occasions to get them. I met with their board and to have them put forth a proposal.
So they have a very interesting plan for it.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Agree
it
100%.
sounded very exciting to me as a mom, as a resident, to see something educational and very nice for the community. I don't know
Agreed.
if we necessarily want more condos.
What is market rate? What is the definition of market rate?
Well, market rate would be the market rate, let's say, for a one-bedroom, two-bedroom apartment in the Village of Brewster, as
So it's-
opposed to senior housing.
Okay.
You know, it's like millennials, trying to get a younger generation in there, going along with the Envision Brewster.
So it's not economically disadvantaged housing, or does it have regulations?
Does market rate rental have regulations?
I know, I'm saying when you do development and the government comes in and says that you need to do.
Subsidized housing?
Thank you, a certain percentage must be subsidized housing.
That's not what they're looking to do.
No, I know that, but
Okay.
I'm saying, are there
Right.
restrictions for that? Is there anything that they have
You
to do,
cannot.
80%
No,
or
you
anything,
cannot.
or 20% of it has to be that due to town or county regulations? So it's 100% market rate?
That's the goal.
Do you know how many units will be there?
That's a good question. No one yet has really invested the time. Daniel Martin, as part of his due diligence, is to have an architect go through the building and determine how many units. People will tell me it's a 60,000 square foot building, you get 60 units. Not really. You have a 5,000 square foot auditorium, you have a lunchroom, cafeteria, wide hallways. So until an architect takes the plans, walks through the building, we really won't know what the count is. I believe there are 27 classrooms, so someone could say it's 27 units, but that's not an accurate number either.
Right. So remember, the item we're talking about right now, there was the secret action. Some of these questions will come right back up when we do the actual contract for the sale.
Right.
So,
Yes.
Yes.
We already have a motion. Okay, so call the question and ask for a vote. All those in favor of the proposed secret action? All those opposed? The motion passes 6-0. Now, we're going to talk about the approval of a resolution for contract of sale of the Garden Street School. I'll take a motion, a second, and then we'll have a discussion on that matter. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Mary Kay. Questions or comments from the board and the public regarding this proposed action item? Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, Bird Agency.
Kevin, do we know, or is he just talking about the building, or previous people have spoken about use of the playground and whatever? Do you know?
This is just dealing with
Just
the
with the
building right
building.
now. Right. That's really what we're trying to do. If you open the door to adding on to, then you talk about stormwater management. You
Right.
bring up a whole host of things that we're not looking to do at this point. At this point, we're just looking to sell the building. Down the road, if you wanted to talk about townhouses, condos, or whatever, that's down the road.
And is the village aware of this potential sale, and has there been any feedback from them?
I've spoken to Pete Hansen.
I'm sorry?
I've spoken to Pete Hansen, that, you know, they're aware of the sale.
Okay.
I've kept them pretty much up to date all along, that, you know, and everyone understands it would more likely be a residential. There have been some proposals that sounded very good. Sadie Purcell was very good. But, you know, the first one that came to the board was going to be artist lofts. Another great idea. Again, the issue came down to they really didn't have the funds. I should say the patriarch of the family decided he didn't want to invest in the property. Sure.
So we talk about, this is the approval for the resolution for the contract of the sale, but we don't necessarily know a lot about what the developer will do. You know, we just saw a presentation on the stresses of how many children we have incoming into the school, the challenges that we have. Granted, there'll be, you know, tax income associated with that, but is there, before it's actually approved, will we see a plan, an architectural plan, know how many housing units will be in there and so forth?
That's really going, the buyer has to go through the planning board, the Village of Brewster Planning Board.
Okay.
There is roughly a 90-day due diligence period where the buyer will invest a fair amount of time and effort to determine exactly how many units. At the end of that 90-day period, he will really know if there are enough units in the building to make it a viable project. Right now, it's a guesstimate.
So the steps are, we approve this board approves the contract, they go to the planning board, and
No, actually, the process will be, the board signs the contract, the buyer has 90-day due diligence period. During that 90-day due diligence period, he will do everything he needs to do. At the end of the 90 days, he lets us know if he wants to go forward. If he decides not to go forward, we basically go back to square one. He goes forward, then it's a matter of going before the planning board with all his plans.
Okay, and the planning board would have the opportunity to veto any of his plans if they didn't align with...
It's a Village of Brewster Planning Board that makes that determination.
That's a good clarification. Thank you, Tom, for that.
Anything else?
Okay, seeing no other questions, I'll call the action item. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion finally passes 6-0. We're on the road. Let's see, knock on wood. Never been closer. Action item number 7 pertains to the approval of participation in cooperative bids. Those of you who've been here before realize it's one of the ways that we bring costs down. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Thank you, Mr. Pettigrew. So cooperative bids are to our advantage. There are 4 of them listed here. They're annual. I'll take a motion, please, from the board for your consideration of these bids. Thank you again, Mary Kay and Kristen. Going back to this side next time. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Action item number 8 concerns the approval of a school resource officer, SRO, agreement between the district, the county of Putnam, and the Putnam County Sheriff's Department. We've been here before, so we're renewing our contract. We'll take a motion, please, from this side of the table. Carrie and Diane, thank you both. Questions or comments from the board?
This keeps the same level of SROs that we
Absolutely.
currently have.
That's correct.
It doesn't include the SPO.
Yeah.
Correct. That's a different contract.
Okay.
Good question. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Action item number 9 concerns the approval of contract for tutoring services.
I'll take this one back.
Thank you,
if don't mind.
Ms. Gosh.
This contract is with St. Vincent's Hospital to provide educational services to one of our students currently hospitalized there. He's a temporary placement.
That's important. We'll take a motion, please, for your consideration of this contract. Thank you, Ms. Masika. Thank you, Diane. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion passes 6-0. Action item number 10 concerns the approval of discontinuance of contract with Xanth Tutoring. Yeah, I guess so.
We are recommending to the board that we discontinue our contract with ZAM Tutoring due to issues that we have encountered over the last several months.
Okay, that's important to note. We'll take a motion, please, from the board concerning this matter. Thank you again, Kristen and Mary Kay. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Action item number 11. Are we going to set a record tonight? Well, the good news is, seriously, the Yankees aren't playing, so do as many action items as you want. Approval of policies. Ms. Gosh, you ready?
I am.
All right.
These policies have been reviewed by legal counsel and have been discussed with our policy committee and recommended to move forward for your approval.
Thank goodness. This time next year, I don't know what I'm going to do without you. Policies. I'll phone in. Okay. Take a motion. Diane, Kerry, thank you both. Questions or comments from the board? There better be none because Ms. Gosh knows her policies. Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, the motion passes 6-0. In all seriousness, thank you, Ms. Gosh, for taking control of this challenge. Action item number 12 concerns the approval of an overnight field trip. This is an annual event also for the girls lacrosse team to go to Boston, Massachusetts, April 4, 5, and 6.
Coach Didio and the girls lacrosse team is proposing to go to Boston next week. It's a wonderful team bonding experience and a great way to start the season.
Got a lot of good stuff happening with it.
And it's been planned a long time.
Yeah,
Long
that's
time.
good.
Okay, so we'll take a motion, please, for your consideration of this overnight field trip. Thank you, Ms. Masika. Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Back to your side next time. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, the motion passes 6-0. And last but not least is the unlucky number 13, action item, approval for an overnight field trip for the varsity baseball spring training, April 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, don't you want to go there with them to Cocoa Beach, Florida?
This plan has also been in the works for many months. I think Coach Cunningham predicted that there might be better weather in Florida than here. So we thank Coach Cunningham for his planning and organization.
Absolutely. Wish them the best of luck. We'll take a motion, please, for your consideration of this overnight field trip. Thank you both again. Kristen and Mary Kay. Comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, the motion passes 6-0. What Major League Baseball team trains in Cocoa Beach? Trivial pursuit question.
That's why we don't know
The
that.
Pirates?
No, but I mean, I figured I could tell you anything. All right, so I'm happy you knew what STEM stood for. What baseball team practices in Cocoa Beach? I don't know. Okay, do you have your consent agenda?
No, number 14.
We have a 14, oh, there it is.
Somebody didn't want to end on the unlucky.
Yeah, you can't end on 13.
Yeah, you can.
Well, you can, but I wouldn't want to run that risk. Approval of an action item for employee number 1015, Ms. Culligan.
This is a settlement agreement for employee number 1015 as previously discussed in executive session.
Understood, it is confidential. Thank you. We'll take a motion, please, for your consideration of this action item. Thank you, Terry and Diane. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion is adopted 6-0. And now we move on to your consideration of the consent agenda, which you have in the packet or in the computer. Take a motion, please, for your consideration of the consent agenda. And back to Sonia and Diane. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion passes 6-0. Now, finally, board remarks and committee updates.
Been a snowy season,
Been
so not a
snowy.
whole lot of committee meetings.
Not very many, I'm afraid.
Steve, I'd like to share, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was in Washington DC last week at the Education Policy Fellowship Program. Thank you, I forgot that last piece. EPFP, with 300 or so educators, professionals, everyone talking about education.
Yep.
From around the country. Two quick things that I found fascinating. One, we often talk and say the phrase, get students college ready. We want students to be ready for kindergarten. So the push is to get students ready, and the idea is maybe the buildings should be ready. Maybe we should be ready to accept whatever students are coming in. Not that we get rid of our responsibility to get the students ready for the next level. We always have that. But are we able to accept students coming in? Are the colleges able to accept the population that's coming to them? So that's an interesting twist, especially given, our fiscal situation, and as Steve mentioned, which is something near to my heart, the New York State Constitution that provides that legal right to all children living in our district. So that's something to think about. And the other thing that, this was a bit encouraging, because we always think about other countries and what they're doing, and sometimes I know I'm a little down, wow, this country's doing so much better, and that country's doing so much better. At Teachers College in New York City, they had a group, I'm going to say, I think it was 20 or so, maybe 25, of educators from China who came to America to find out how do we teach creativity, because they can't figure out how to do it.
That's true. And when we visited China a few years ago, the educators there told us the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They said, with bluntness, we can outproduce you
Yep.
with anything,
And
but we can't come up with the ideas to mass produce.
And they're still, trying to put it in this box, and, so that kind of, I came away saying, okay, we are, even with our challenges, there's something good. There was a lot more going on, and Dr. Zamperlin was there as well, and I'm sure he has other things to share, but those were two things that stood out to
Thank
me
you for bringing
to bring back.
that in. Important. Other information from the board?
I wanted to bring up that notices were sent out about the career fair at the high school, which is
Yes.
something we discussed
Yes.
many months ago at a board meeting. And I imagine the success of it depends upon people in the community with careers, jobs, whatever they can share with the kids, whether it's investment banking, being a nurse, whatever it is, tradesmen. I think it's important that people step up and show up for this, because it's important to hear from people who actually do the jobs, and it's also a great way for the kids to have a mentor who could open doors for them in the future.
Absolutely.
So hopefully
That's
people
great.
will sign up for that.
Good point. Thanks for reminding us. Yes, ma'am?
And then I just want to add, so the Brewster Education Foundation is busy preparing for the annual gala, April 20th, and tickets can be purchased through the website. Should be fun, different theme.
April
It's been
20th.
disclosed, denim, fancy denim. That's it.
Thank you.
What was the theme? Fancy denim?
Fancy denim.
Oh, interesting.
Not gonna be able to pull that one off.
It's like denim and diamonds. Steve, I just have one thing.
Sure.
I had attended the safety presentation, and I just want to say for those who presented, they did a great job, particularly the SROs, because they really engaged the audience. They answered the questions, they were very honest, they were very forthcoming, and they were very, above all, reassuring. So that I felt was very important. There are some questions about where people can find it, because they know it was recorded. So there are some people who couldn't make the meeting. Would that be on the Brewster YouTube, or?
It's on the website under safety, which is a newly established webpage that Victor and Andy created. It includes the presentation, the slides, as well as the video.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, so now we open the floor to public remarks and information. Floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I have a question about the presentation on the budget. So you talked about environmental demographics and the economically disadvantaged growth from 2010 to 2017, and that there was a 22% growth of poverty level. So that's from 11% to 33%. The town of Southeast, inclusive of Brewster, has about a poverty rate of about 6%. The county of Putnam has a correlating poverty rate of about 6%. So the question is these numbers are coming from the district. Are they being generated from the free lunch program? And if that is the case, what's the audit process for it? How many of those are audited? And if it's not the free lunch program that's driving the 33%, what is driving it? And so I refer to a comment that you made earlier, Dr. Jambour, as you said, when you're looking for a community to live in, you want to be able to see some of these things. And if I'm in this community for a long time, grew up, went to Brewster schools, and if I now see a 30% poverty rate, there's no way in heck that I'm moving to a community that has a 22% increase in a 7-year period when we have seen, to Mr. Carlson's point, economic improvement. So we have seen the entire economy stabilize, economic growth of record numbers, low employment rates of record numbers, yet Brewster School District is having an increase of 22%. That's horrifying for parents and the community members to see. So I want to understand, what's that 33%? What drives it? If it is a free lunch, we want to make certain, our community wants to make certain a child in need is fed, but we want to make certain that that parent is not driving an Escalade, and they're not living in a $750,000 house within our community.
Right.
So I'm hoping you guys could just
And I'm
tell us
sorry,
about
I missed your
33%.
name.
Jamie Callahan.
Okay, so Ms. Callahan, I'll start off from what I can think about. As you were saying it, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if the town of Southeast uses the same yardstick for determining poverty as we have to use. So I'll answer the second part first, because I know
It
the
was,
second part.
that's federal data, not town data.
So this goes back to your question also, and the question that many of you might have. So we're given a yardstick from the National School Lunch Program guidelines, and it requires that we count by one criterion. The criterion is who signs up for these free and reduced lunches. So that's our one single data point. I would suppose the town of Southeast uses a different kind of criterion, which is probably broader. But if you read into the specs on this, you'll also see a sentence in there where they'll tell you, you shall sample 3% of those applying for this free and reduced lunch, and only 3%. So you can't go under, you can't go over, and you cannot use other devices for ascertaining what their, quote, poverty level is. But that's the given to participate in the federal lunch program. So it doesn't ask for our opinion whether we like that yardstick or not. It simply says, if you want to participate in this program, here's your yardstick, sample the 3%, and that will be representative of, as far as they are concerned, what's happening with this sample of people. Given that methodology, which is, I think we'll all agree, is rather limited, right? We end up with the percentage that we end up with, and it is disproportionate to the number that the town of Southeast is reporting. Because they're probably measuring apples while we're measuring oranges.
So I have researched this, and I have looked at the New York State Education Department Child Nutrition Program, and I've actually looked at their training materials for that, and that safety food authorities are obligated to verify all questionable applications, and that they have a large driver of what can be acceptable documentation, such as W-2 forms and other verifications. So as a community, we want to make certain that the people are filling out and providing documentation that provides the accurate understanding that they are truly in need and therefore are going to receive that aid that they need to, versus people that may take advantage of a loosey-goosey system that is, and therefore not showing the proper documentation.
I think we all agree.
Right, so I think the question is, it's not just that form, but what is the supporting documentation that's required? Sorry?
There is none. The government does not require.
See, I have different information. I'll share the document that I have with you guys. I'll send that to the board.
That's fair. Yeah, please do that.
We also have it on the website.
Yeah.
I mean, because my understanding is that it's not required, and that 3% is generated, is a random generation. We can't go, okay, well, we heard that so-and-so's driving an Escalade, let's look at that one.
We can't do that.
It's randomly generated.
Yeah, no, that's the audit versus the approved documentation that can be collected for the process of examining whether they get approved or not.
Okay, so let's do as you suggest.
Yeah, I'll send that to you guys.
And you hit upon another theme too, which I like what I'm hearing so far. So we're in this together.
Absolutely.
And obviously, we're looking to take care of business correctly. There's no reason to expect we wouldn't. We don't get a dime, otherwise.
Right, I actually have the requirements.
Okay, fine.
As stated in the rules
But we can't get into
published.
that right now,
Okay.
because we can't get into the dialogue per se. So I believe you were ready to go. You had something else you wanted to say?
Could I say something to Jane?
Yeah.
There are about 102 students in the total population that makes up our free reduced lunch numbers that constitute the 32% reside in a single facility that's considered a delinquent and neglected facility. That's Green Chimneys. That's the name that the federal government uses. All of that number becomes a part of our total number because the facility resides in Brewster, even though children from all over the region go there. That's a federal regulation, so, but 102 of those youngsters are part of the number for Brewster, and in turn, that facility receives a portion of the Title I funds.
That's very helpful to know, thank you.
Yeah, it is.
And the number vacillates, but it's
Yeah,
usually
of course.
somewhere around 98 to about 110.
Is that new though, or has that always been the case?
Always.
So then that wouldn't show the big difference in the percentage increase that we've seen.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I don't know over time.
Unless it increases.
It can't, it cannot.
There's no cap for their enrollment.
I don't know whether they're at the cap.
I don't know either.
If there's
They
an
are.
increase
Yeah,
there.
the count is on the state site, so that's where we actually get the information from, so that is where we get it, and they are required to actually every October to actually conduct this count. So it's whatever that number is in October is the number that's used, that then is the number that we receive.
And Donna, and Steve, you might remember Alice, the
poverty.
It's not asset limited income constraint. So there's a level of, it's not poverty level, it's here at poverty level. So the city, the state, the federal government doesn't consider it poverty, but it is when it comes to.
So that's an acronym you're all invited to look up. I posted it in response to someone earlier this week. ALICE. I won't even try to guess at it. It's very close to what you say. But here's the bottom line. Merely counting a single indicator does not give you the real deal on where the poverty is. And until and unless they start to look at a more enriched measure, which United Way is sponsoring, no community is going to get the support that they really do deserve for the poverty that they really do have. And it changes. You will understand this completely. And I hope I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings if you're from Arkansas. But if you're from a rural area of Arkansas and you're making this much money, oh, God bless you, and it'll be what it is in Arkansas. But if you've got that much money and you happen to be living on the cusp between Westchester and Putnam counties, you're going to be experiencing a heck of a lot more poverty with this amount of money.
24,000.
Thank you, 24,000. So that's what Alice argues for. Alice argues for a more enriched, contextualized way of looking at the money that a family has, so that you have a better perspective on their, quote, poverty, and then what funding would be appropriate to serve them. Because otherwise, we will never be getting our fair share. That's why I went to the red line on Mr. Carlson's presentation. We're not even getting what we would normally be getting for our population. Forget about their special need or their poverty status. We are so far behind the ball game right now, it's pathetic. Yes, ma'am. Your name, please?
Karen Doby.
Hi, Karen.
And
welcome.
I wrote it down. My name is Karen Doby, and my husband and I have lived in the town of Southeast for the past 20 years. We have a daughter that recently graduated from Brewster High School and one that is currently a sophomore. I want to thank Dr. Henning Piedmont for responding so quickly to my email on a Sunday and answering my question about our district having a Title I status and receiving aid. By definition, it is a program that provides financial assistance to local educational agencies and schools with high numbers or high percentages, meaning 40% or greater, of children for low-income families to help ensure that all children meet the challenging state academic standards. It is very surprising to learn that we receive funding for the entire district, not just one or two schools, but the entire district, because of low economic status, when there's so much new construction in the area, homes being built, businesses being built, and looking up and finding the median price for a house here in our area is $255,000. I would like to ask the Board of Education and our superintendent to create a presentation on an upcoming agenda to provide data and clarify how we qualify to meet the criteria for Title I status, how it impacts our schools and communities with the allocation of funds, and the staggering data that shows we have a poverty increase of 22% since 2008. Please help myself and the community better understand the factors that have contributed to this poverty increase in our community and schools, and how we are monitoring them, and allow the community to ask, to have a further discussion, to ask further questions. The data and percentages are overwhelming for parents and for taxpayers, and the clarification and breakdown would be greatly appreciated. I think you can see that there are so many concerns and so many questions. I thank you for your time and your consideration, and I really look forward to a response, and I think many people in the community do also. It's very confusing, overwhelming, scary, what the impact that has on here. I want every child to have what they deserve, but it just is so surprising to me to hear these numbers, and I think it's surprising to so many people in the community. I think there needs to be clarification.
Absolutely.
So I would really appreciate that, and I think a presentation like you did tonight, I wish more people were here to see it, but I think if it really broke it down, what makes up Title I, that is a very scary thing to hear as a homeowner and also a parent that comes here. And it just, like someone had said before, it's not inviting people to come to our community, and I really don't feel like it's a great representation. So if the numbers are not really justifying what we have, then we really need to look into this, because I want our community to grow and our school to grow, and I thank you all for your time and all your efforts that you've done. And I think this is something new that many of us did not realize for many years, and I know it's been here, but I think it really needs to be broken down and clarified for all of us.
Thank you. No debate with that. Yes, ma'am.
I actually came about something else tonight. Just was responding to that. So I was really excited, and many of the parents that I've been talking to, about the new registrar. We hadn't heard that, and it just kind of came out in the last week or so. I also understand that you are instituting some new criteria to verify residency, which we're also very excited about. Dr. Jambor, you said earlier tonight, and it couldn't have been the most perfect thing, is be possessive and be proud. And so, Dr. Henning, you talked about some of the things that are happening, and what I think would be very helpful is for you to hear from the community about some of the red flags that we still see. So what I think would be helpful is if we are able to get a presentation on what are the job responsibilities of the registrar, maybe potentially add a task group, a task force. I know you guys have been open to doing that with the community on the safety and other things. Get a task force for us to be able to give you input on some of the red flags that we see. You did mention, Dr. Henning, that there were protocols in place for staff, bus drivers, and administrators to follow up. We'd like to see the documentation of those and make certain that everybody knows about that. We've done some research. We've called Richfield, who are, you can't get in there even if you live there. We've talked to Somers. We've talked to a lot of the different school districts. We've been surveying the requirements that you need and how do we make it more rigid, because we want to educate every child that's in the boundaries of this district, but we know that there's big business of residency fraud, and I think the term is boundary hopping, and we want to make certain. So some of the things I just want to make certain, that we see that are red flags. Students that regularly show up at school in taxis, and we're talking about younger kids. So it's not like, oh, I'm a 10th grader, my mom's already left, I missed the school bus, I'm going to hop in a taxi. It's kids that are coming on a regular basis. How does the school address that? Because I know other schools have a reporting mechanism for that. If you go through and drive through the town of Brewster, you're going to see probably 100 Connecticut license plates. I understand the argument has been said, it's easier to register your car in Connecticut and so forth. These people are coming, they're dropping off their kids, and then they are going and returning back to their residency. Children that don't know where they live when there's a dismissal. The bus driver goes to drop them off, and they're like, this is not my home, this is not where I live. So we want to make sure that we have the proper protocols, understand what those are, and understand, since the registrar's been in place, how many non-residency students have been removed from the district, and how many investigations have been started. And I see you taking diligent notes, that's wonderful, but I'll also email this to you just so that you can capture all of that.
Appreciate it.
So.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. It might be helpful, pursuant, I'm speaking way out of turn, so I could be wrong.
But you're leaving, so you're like, whatever.
It's a good whatever.
Yes.
And my wife said, tell them what you think, Steve.
That's right.
So I probably will not get nasty because I believe in our mission here. And I want to fortify that even as I'm leaving. So I'm being respectful because we're simpatico on these issues. We're going to make this work. But what I was going to suggest, and I'm speaking out of turn, suppose we went down the road of a task force, and I think there's some goodness in that. We have to find a way to start collecting names so that we get to the right people, so there's representative, so there's people who will do the work too. Because we don't want a one-shot task force that meets one night and then they pack up the circus tent. We really want to hang in there. This is a challenge. This is a community identity challenge, and we've got to put in the time to address it. So figure out a way, send us your ideas, how do we get the right names into a doable list? A task force of 30 is undoable. A task force of 3 is not representative. So we're looking around 8 to 10.
Yep, I agree with you.
So, and we're marching in that direction together. You know, take a snapshot in your brain of this conversation. This is ideal. This is the way we're going to get there. Because we're being respectful, we're not blaming, we're saying we're going to fix this. I can't ask for more. Yes, sir.
I had a question about the red line.
Yeah.
Have you done any research with other school districts that the government owes, the state owes, other school districts similar amounts of money?
Oh, yeah.
Are we owed more money than other school districts?
We're, unfortunately, sir, Mr. Dovey, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in good company. That's the good news and the bad news. And I do these data with West Putt, so it represents 54 school districts, okay? It's like $308 million that we've been stiffed on by this administration up in Albany.
We Brewster?
No. 54 cents.
Oh, that's okay.
No, we're in the bucket for 11 million. The 54 are in the bucket for 308 million over that period of time. And we are as angry and frustrated as anybody because I think you know our heart's in the right place. And money is not the cure. I'm not going there. But you can't leave home without it. Yes, sir.
Well, with the upcoming elections, maybe if you stir the pot a little bit, you can get some money from these people.
Well, I can't say that, but I certainly like the way that sounded. No, that's a delicate balance too. A board cannot get political, but holy Christmas, we're up to here in this mess, you know? And your kids only get the chance to be kids once. There's no do-overs. So, you know, my daughter is gone from the school district. She got a great education here. I'm worried about your kids. My daughter left in 09. I thought I was leaving in 09. I said to my daughter, who has always been a partner in these decisions, so Marissa, what am I doing? She says, what do you mean, what are you doing? I said, well, am I leaving or not? She goes, no, you cannot. Why not? She told me point blank, because people will think you were only in it for me, and I know that you weren't. So I'm still here. And I invite you to get involved with the same level of commitment. Nice conversation. Yes, ma'am. You have
When you've mentioned shared services, do you mean sharing services across districts? Because I know over the years, teachers, people have said, with all the different special needs, and I have a cousin who is a special needs teacher, but she's a speech teacher, but she had to teach children with autism in her district because they just didn't have the funds.
Right. So the answer to your question
would
is
we share
when we use the term in terms of a budget, shared services takes on a special meaning. It means that we will partner with other agencies in this county and collectively, hopefully, bring the cost down.
Okay, so not shared in the sense that we can
that's a
almost like make a BOCES type of place
That's a different conversation.
For special needs.
Yeah, that's a
so we
different
can pool
conversation
our
altogether.
resources over. Is that ever possible? That we
It
could
is,
pool our
it happens,
It
but
does.
that wasn't what we discussed tonight.
Well, what I'm asking, is that a possibility to
It
help
is.
with our collective problem across districts?
And this district is pretty darn good at it. We're always looking for creative solutions. Yes, ma'am.
No, that's what we do at BOCES.
Right.
That's what we do share that at BOCES, because if we have, and it's not a problem, if we have a student who needs therapy walking in a pool for whatever reason,
Yep.
we at Brewster cannot afford to put in a pool.
Sure.
However, BOCES, if anyone is welcome to go and see it, it's wonderful. They have a treadmill with the pool, and they can accommodate the kids, and, so that's what BOCES is, and that's what, so we do that.
Okay.
We do that, yes.
Completely.
Yes.
Okay.
If BOCES has something that we need, we partner with BOCES. We're already partnering with them, so we have that wealth of information,
Well, we
that
have a
wealth
lot
of
of kids
resources.
being bused all other places too, right?
Wherever services are, yeah.
That's true. That's the purpose of a BOCES. BOCES came into existence in the 1940s to provide shared services on a regional basis that the individual schools could not otherwise afford on their own. Okay, so we have our homework. We have some things to get to. Yes, Bertie? Hi there.
Hi, this is kind of off of this
I
topic.
won't forget you, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bertie.
And you've heard me speak of this before, and I didn't notice within the budget presentation, Dr. Henning mentioned attrition. I wondered if all those positions are going to be filled. And as Dr. Jambor knows, what's near and dear to my heart is reading at the primary school. I went through it with you. We had to cut so many services, and I know back when Garden Street was open, I believe between both JFK and Garden Street, we had something like 8 reading teachers, and now we're down to 4. I understand we have the morning program, which is not a mandatory program, but I'm just wondering what the cost of that program is between busing and the salaries that we're being paid, and if there's any chance, because I believe the number is 60 at the first grade level that are going for reading support. Listening to Michelle's presentation about our ELA scores back with the state of the district have all gone down. I feel like we're paying the piper now, and you yourself have said we need a good foundation. You start with the young kids, and I'm wondering if there's been any consideration at all at adding to the reading staff at the primary level?
Not with the budget gap that we have. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality. We do have some retirements, and, depending on the numbers of people who select the retirement incentive, that'll govern whether or not, the people who are retiring, not the ones who are going for the incentive, the ones who are announced, or others who are not coming back, whether those positions will be replaced. That, attrition is a much, better way to approach this rather than going within the workforce and laying people off. So we don't want to do that, which is why the attrition is the method that we have available.
We're also getting to a point where, and this is the point we don't want to be at, where 2 legitimate needs, take for example, the reading needs of children and the mental health needs of children, are pitted against each other. So now we have to choose between Peter and Paul, with dollars that are no longer at all available. It's a crime. And you have a budget that's due to you, the people, April 1st. I think somebody's got an ironic sense of humor that happens to be April Fool's Day, because every year it happens the same way. But we're going to wait, we're going to see. But this is really a state that has not fulfilled its obligations, and I'm not kicking the can down the road. We're doing what we can in this room, but we could use some help. When we went to Washington, and pleaded, our people from New York State are in our corner. Our state senators, our representatives from this area, they're not the problem. There's a log jam down there, and I'll say something that will offend some folks, but I'll tell you something. If you're spending this much on other stuff, including military, and this much on education of children, welfare of children, there's a problem. And I have said that to Lamar Alexander, who's the champion of education. I don't get it. I think you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. But I'm biased. I'm pro-kids, pro-education. And I'm with you 1,000%. But we're not being heard.
I don't disagree with you and what is being done. I just wondered, have we done any kind of do we have any data on the kids who are going to the before school program and how that, I'll just say this quickly. I taught reading recovery. I know that's oftentimes 12 weeks of a program for a kid who's just on the cusp, not below the 20%, but maybe at 22 or 23. You give them 12 weeks of reading, and we never have to pay for them again to have support services. So, right. So I'm wondering, have we gotten data? Is there any chance that, you know, if we have a little extra money, we can look into additional reading support at that level? That's all.
I know there's anecdotal data, and certainly Dr. Zamplin and Ms. Cherry can speak to this, but I know from teachers, they reported that there's tremendous value of previewing content, of previewing skills in the morning, and then going into the classes later on, and those children are able to participate, they know the vocabulary, they're applying the skills, and I think that they're graduating children out of the more intensive program. So that's what I know anecdotally. Dr. Zamplin and Ms. Cherry, if you would like to share anything else.
Sure, we've made a shift even in the morning with the program to go towards more individualized work with Fast Forward in the morning, where they have an hour of reading before they even start the school day. It's a model we picked up using ENL services in the morning, where the children get an hour's worth of study before the day even begins. And we do the same thing with math. As we've identified these children, we've also identified those children who are on the cusp. We call them the cuspy kids. Right. And we're looking at alternate funding also to get teaching assistants to support the reading teachers during the day. We're looking for how we can fund that. We have a plan right now, which it's almost making the next step over. We're in a hiring process, actually, to bring in someone during the day for the remainder of the school year to assist the reading teachers. But it will be a teaching assistant, not a teacher. But it's another step in the right direction in getting not just those students who are being serviced in the morning for the hour, but those cuspy kids that we see during the school day that we can also bring in and do this fast forward 5 days a week to monitor their progress. And that's where we're seeing the data and the students growing. We're getting the feedback from the parents like, thank you. You know, my child is now seeing progress. They're really being confident in their learning. But again, we did make those cuts a few years ago. We do have to adapt, and we have been doing that. We're just making adjustments in a different way in order to make that happen.
Thank you.
Dr. Zamplin. I'm sorry, it took you a long time to get back to your side.
My name is Tricia O'Gorman. I have been a teacher for 16 years. I'm K-6 and 712 Earth Science and General Science certified. I've been teaching middle school that entire time. I've taught physical science, life science, general earth science, and Regents Earth Science, accelerating in 8th grade. I'd like to address my concerns with our 712 science program. Approximately 10 years ago, Gosh, you can confirm that number, but we moved our middle school model to teach living environment over 2 years. This is not endorsed by the New York State Education Department. What they say is the provision for acceleration was put in place to provide opportunities for individual students rather than as a vehicle for accelerating entire cohorts of students into high school courses. While the data says that we do succeed on the living environment regents, my first question is, just because the kids are passing the test, are they really truly learning science? Or are they having content kind of shoved down their throats for 2 years so that they will pass the test? Because my 7th grader is now in living environment phase 1. My 9th grader finished up last year. This entire year so far, my 7th grader has taken one exam, the midterm, that was not entirely multiple choice. One exam where she has had to actually construct a response. If I ever gave exams like that, I would be brought up like for questioning with my administration. I guarantee it. I could never, ever do that where I work. I work in Paternal Lewisboro, by the way. Also, the 7th graders are taught, excuse me, I forgot my books. The 7th and 8th graders are taught this curriculum. This curriculum, everybody remember these? Okay, parents, books? This is the curriculum that's taught over 2 years with an extra period every 4th day. So every 4th day, the 7th and 8th graders have an extra period of science. Lab, we call it lab. That's great, because science is a laboratory course, and they need hands-on experiences in order to learn science, in order to become STEM learners, STEAM learners, right? So that's my concern at the middle school. And again, while we have success on the regions, my question is, are they really truly learning science if they're taking multiple choice exams every couple of weeks? Moving on to the high school, I went to a meeting last March or April, I believe, with Ms. Forler about the change in the high school schedule. So the high school, I don't know if everyone knows this, but the high school's day was shorter than the other 3 schools' days. I don't know how they got away with that for so long, but they did. So the school day was being expanded to match the rest of the school's length of day. As a result, the periods were able to become longer. There was talk about going to an 8-period day as opposed to a 9-period day. And in that case, the thought was, well, since the periods are going to be getting longer, there would not be a need any longer for an every 4th day lab period at the high school. And if truly the periods were that much longer, like 50-minute periods, that might be true, because 50 minutes is a good amount of time on learning. But the decision was made to keep the periods at 9 periods during the day. But the extension in the school day did allow the periods to become 42-minute periods. Well, if you multiply the numbers out, we are technically in compliance with the 180 minutes per week that you need to get a high school credit in a course. On top of the 180 minutes per week, you need 1,200 minutes of lab seat time. If a student is absent for 1 day, they fall under the 1,200 minutes. We're in compliance technically, but if a student has an extended absence, they're really falling below that minute. Okay. So in freshman year, they take earth science. A lot of the kids take earth science. A double accelerated kid takes physics. There are no more every 4th day lab periods at the high school. No more every 4th day lab periods at the high school. Now, you said before that we wanted to what did you say before we wanted to, if we're looking for value-added indicators for this district. Let me just tell you what the other districts in the area do. Yonkers, they have 3 days of lab periods in a row, 3 days off. So at a bare minimum, they're having 2 days of an extra period of lab and science. New York City, 1 extra lab period per week. Carmel, bio and earth science at the high school have a lab period every other day, on top of their regular science period. For chemistry and physics, it's every 3rd day, I guess because fewer kids take those classes. Katona-Lewisboro, all biochem, physics, and earth science kids have labs every other day at the high school. If they get into the electives, they don't have a lab period. What does that say? We're falling below Yonkers in New York City in terms of our lab program in science. We are doing Project Lead the Way in the elementary schools, but our high school kids don't have a laboratory experience until they get into AP classes. I'm so upset. As a science educator, as an earth science educator, our best and brightest, our double accelerated kids, take earth science and physical science in 6th grade. They take bio 7, 8. They go into physics in 9th. They go into chemistry, usually in 10th. Our best and brightest students could be graduating from Brewster Central School District, and the last geoscience that they could possibly take, if they choose not to take AP Environmental, the last geoscience that they take was in 6th grade. Climate change, anyone? We're trying to get kids, especially women, into the sciences, to be engineers. And this is what we have at the high school. I'm very upset. Can you tell? I'm very upset. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Oh, by the way, this is taught over 2 years with every 4th day lab. This is the earth science book, taught in 1 year with no lab period. I highly doubt that my 9th grade daughter is actually going to finish the curriculum. Not every kid has a mother for an earth science teacher. So that's my spiel. Thank you for your time. So I would just like to set into your, put a brain worm in there and get you thinking about that. Thank you.
Okay, well presented. Okay, yes, sir. I see 2 over there, so, yeah. Okay, 1, 2, yep.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Sherman. I moved to Brewster in 2007. I have 3 kids in the district, 1 in high school. Obviously, school safety is important of mine, as well as a lot of the residency concerns that I've been hearing. I know that I'm really happy to hear that the registrars coming in to play with, some of the local issues that have been happening in New Rochelle, to say the least, are a little concerning. And I think some of the issues there, you know, from what I'm hearing is, right, these are kids that weren't in the district, and it's bringing on additional liabilities to the school as well. So I think in terms of what the registrar and what they're looking to do, you know, I'm glad that we're doing these validations, or at least we're going to hear maybe more about those, but I'd like to, you know, recommend that we look at, you know, doing, you know, annualized audits of this and making sure that we're keeping people, maybe they got through the first thing, that they are still staying here. They're not moving out of the town and they're going somewhere else and still liking, you know, New York State education versus, you know, potentially Connecticut. So I would like to ask that, you know, that we look at that and put that on the registrar's, you know, book of work, and the task force, whoever recommended it. I think that sounds like a good idea, and we can more involved. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Jeff Versinko. I want to thank a few people first. Thank you very much. As a person with a biology degree, a physical therapist, and a bazillion sciences, thank you very much. And to other people too, this is the first board meeting I've ever been to, and I'm impressed with the amount of passion that's in the room, and thank you to all you guys. My topic is almost embarrassing compared to what I all right? So again, thank you. I'm really very impressed. I want to talk about vacation. I know that sounds insane after all this, but I have trouble with the idea that there's really no week in the winter for families to get away. So if you have a job, I've treated many patients at the hospital, I hear this from many, many times. They're pavers, roofers, contractors, that's when they go away. They go away all winter long. I myself have a second job where I don't really want to go away in the summer. It's very difficult to go away in the summer. We now have next week where there's 3 days, I think we have to go back to school. My kids are going to be there, my wife's going to be there. We canceled the trip to Florida, we pretty much take every year. But I know lots of people in the community are not going to be there. So my guys are probably not going to learn a whole lot unless something's going to happen that I'm unaware of, because I'm getting the impression there will be a lot of empty seats next week, which stinks, because why can't we guarantee 1 week for families in the off-season? And then rather than having 10 straight weeks. And my wife's a teacher, she hates when I say this, maybe some of you hate this too, which is, you guys have 10 weeks in a row. And you start to lose grip on reality of the people that don't are. I know we just made friends now, making enemies. I like my job. I have 10 weeks. Not everybody gets 10 weeks. So, and not everybody can go away in the summer. So I'd like you to reconsider for next year, because it looks like we're going to make the same mistake next year. Because if we want to save money on buses, some of them say how to deploy the chains on the back. Nobody's ever putting snow chains on buses anymore around here. Nobody's going out in the snow. So is there any way we can relook at that for next year? Because there's 4 days in February, in 2 and 2. It's really not enough for many people to really go away. So they take a long weekend, but it seems to me it's pretty easy compared to all the other problems to just carve out an extra day here or there, bang, you get your week. Kids don't cry, we go to Florida, everybody wins.
Okay.
Right? I don't know, I wasn't even sure if this was an appropriate thing to bring up.
We could use a ground ball.
Damn, I couldn't follow you up. Thank you. But seriously, what's the chance of that happening?
Every year, we go back to the beginning in terms of schedule, and every year we pick up a strength and we pick up a liability. It's been a real challenge, but we're with you. I mean, 10 weeks in a row is a lot.
Okay.
So we're kindred spirits on the problem.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do with the solution.
But the meeting for that was last month, correct?
Right.
The budget, or the schedule's been passed?
No, we're still talking about it.
But every district is looking at their calendars, so that you know, because this is an issue across the region. There were some districts that lost time because they had power outages, and so they had absolutely no vacation. So everyone's looking at that February break to see
what can be done. And obviously, as you know, it's, we have constraints and we have to have a certain number of days and what counts. So, everyone's looking at that.
Well, and a longer February break would necessarily mean a shorter spring break.
Right.
Which will work for some people, it will not work for others.
Right.
A longer February break, where it's more of a guarantee, would result in a shorter spring break. So it's, it's sort of a trade-off.
Or just have one
What
that's
about the-
guaranteed, one untouchable. I don't know,
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter if the winter team would be in
Like we used
February.
to have no
So
February.
there's one untouchable, it seems like both, you lost both.
Well,
We couldn't get away from it.
Going back 2 years, the reason we went to the 2 days in 1 week in February and 2 in the next is that we had a very bad winter. And the issue was, we had all these days off and then we were going to have a full week off. So that didn't bode well with lots of people in the community. So the one thing that we don't have any control over is what the winter is going to be. So we can make whatever schedule we can, which is based upon previous schedules, but still, whatever happens that winter, or, whether it is weather or whether it is the power outage, that impacts us. And so we do look at historical data in determining the calendars, and we look at that, we look at data, we look at what's happening regionally as well in terms of when spring breaks occur, or when, whether a February break is a full week. There are a number of districts that have 2 days. There's some that have 4, some have a whole week. So it does vary, but then that means there's a change on the other end as well in terms of what happens in the April break. But we understand your point completely.
I sympathize, too.
2 seconds, it's important to families.
That's too bad.
It's
I want to take one more question that I thought was over here, and then we have an exec meeting to go to shortly. Yes, ma'am.
I know it's getting late, so one of the line items on the budget was about administrative increases, pay raises. And I would just ask in your future, I know there's more budget meetings that are going to be a more in-depth presentation. Just off the bat for the community, I know that there was an assistant principal at the high school who was let go. There's a lot of, I don't know how much can be revealed about that because of privacy concerns, but there's a lot of concern in the community about pensions and all this, and also the head of transportation. I don't think is any longer employed at the, I don't know what happened there. So I would just request in future budget presentations that could be more explained, where that money's going, because it was a big chunk of money.
Sure.
And, we all know that the administration works hard, and we just want to understand where that was just a quick line item.
So here's 2 numbers that I'll suggest we all look forward to. I do every year.
Right.
I'm going to look forward to seeing what our cost per pupil is as compared to all the schools in this area. And I'm going to make a bet, because it almost always happens, but we'll see what happens. I bet you our cost per pupil will be just about at the median in this region. The other number I'm going to look for is similar. I'm going to ask, and you can keep track of it, what is our administrative cost per pupil, and how does that compare to the regional data? And the reason why I do that is because being at the median is not a bad place to be, and it contextualizes your local costs. So if you can say a teacher or the instructional cost per student in Brewster is at the median, that's not a bad place to be. If you can say that your administrative cost per student is at the median, again, not a bad place to be. But we won't know that until we look at that context.
But those 2 people in particular, like we were talking about teachers retiring through attrition.
Sure.
They were making a lot of money. They had been with the district for a certain amount of time.
Absolutely.
So, why they left, I don't know what could be revealed to the community or what happened. Even a brief explanation, or that we
it's a
can't tell you.
personnel issue. We may not be able to get into the why for it, but we can certainly talk about cost savings, what we call breakage. So that's fair game.
And I would just think that would then cause a decrease in administrative pay, as opposed to a big. So just to understand now how that would work would be
fine, and that's
very
coming up
clear.
in one of our next discussions. Good anticipation.
Could I just, real quick, and I'll let you go. This is it. This is all. This is one of the best board meetings that I've been to in about 12 or 13 years because there is community participation. I sat up there, I sat out here, and if we get 2 people out here, we were lucky.
This was good.
So, I mean,
Guys, deserve a pat on the back.
there you go. I mean, I just, keep coming. Keep coming.
You noticed, Bernie. Good point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Dr. Young.
It's really, it's